And I just want to start by saying that I see that lately you have been a big critique of Israel in general and the way Israel is doing right now, even though you used to be a fan. I watched one of your interviews. You said that you think the Jews deserves a Jewish state in the Holy Land, but not on the expense of the Palestinians. But this and what's happening now will lead to Israel getting swamped. That's what you said. I'm quoting what you said. How will it get swamped? I just want to know, how do you think Israel will get swamped? And is it even possible in the near future for Israel to be swamped? Will Israel always remain the dominant player in the Middle East? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, just demographics alone dictate that Israel cannot be the dominant player in and of itself. You know, 9 million Jews does not give you the demographic ability to dominate hundreds of millions of Arabs. So swamp is what happens when 100 million people make 9 million disappear. Now, that's not what I'm advocating. I don't want that. I believe that that should not be ever be allowed to. And to be honest, while there might be a handful of people in the Islamic community that seek that kind of revenge on Israel, my limited knowledge of Islam is that it is a religion of peace, and that it advocates the peaceful coexistence of people of the book. So the notion that Muslims are inherently programmed to kill Jews is just stupid. It's just frankly wrong. The problem isn't Judaism. The problem is Zionism.
Exactly.
And political Zionism. And political Zionism can only exist if Israel is backed by the collective strength of the Western world, in particular the United States. The United States is the guarantor of political Zionism. And so when you take a look at what's happening right now, Israel is in the process of losing the support of the United States. For the first time ever, we're seeing massive demonstrations in the streets of the United States, not in support of Israel, but in support of Palestine. And these demonstrations, in many cases, take a sympathetic approach towards Hamas, even, and an understanding of what happened on October 7th and why it happened. And I think there's also an appreciation of the goals and objectives of the October 7th operation. It wasn't designed to drive Israel into the sea. It was a very clever operation designed, I believe, to achieve three things: the creation of conditions necessary for the creation of a Palestinian state, a legitimate Palestinian state, not the fake Palestinian state that Israel's been trying to sell to the Palestinian people and stuff, as we see in the Abraham Accord. That's not a Palestinian state. That's a joke. That's a travesty. A genuine Palestinian state, at a minimum along the lines envisioned by the Oslo Accords, a two-state solution, 1967 borders. But even that was an Israeli dictated outcome. A real Palestinian state, I think, has to take into account the 1948 borders, and and things of that nature. But that's a political discussion. That's a political discussion that's going to be had by people moving in that direction. But we're talking about it now because of October 7th.
This
is the important thing.
That's awesome, because that was my second question. If you were the leader of Hamas before October 7th, would you have ordered to perform the October 7th operation? So this was like a master plan, in your own opinion, that was planned by Hamas?
I believe this was a masterful plan planned by Hamas. They made one strategic error. One strategic error. I think it's common knowledge that the Hamas fighters are extraordinarily well disciplined. They're very capable. They're very religious. They're very disciplined. When you're at war, there will be horrific consequences of war. And There was no way Hamas could launch the attack it did without Israeli civilians being caught up in the crossfire. But even the Israeli army acknowledges that the majority of the atrocities that took place on October 7th were not committed by Hamas. They were committed by
The IDF soldiers.
enraged
Crossfire.
civilians. Well, there was you have the crossfire, the overreaction of the Israeli forces, but you also have a situation where Hamas came through the barrier, and behind them came less disciplined forces who had revenge on their mind. They weren't part of the planning of the operation. They were reacting based upon an opportunity. And these are people who had been bombed, tortured, arrested, beat, and there was hate in their hearts. Hamas launched the attack not with hate in their hearts, but with the discipline of a military force carrying out a military mission. But these follow-on echelons came out, and they, I believe, committed many atrocities. And Hamas's strategic mistake was not to have people controlling the entry into Israel, to have Hamas forces there telling these undisciplined people, no, you shall not come in here. I think that was a mistake because it has diluted the impact of Hamas's military achievements by giving Israel the ability to carry out a counter-propaganda campaign that highlights genuine instances of abuses, of atrocities carried out by Palestinian gunmen coming from Gaza that Israel has been able to say this was Hamas. It wasn't Hamas. Hamas performed in a very disciplined fashion. I'm not saying they didn't kill Israeli civilians, but they didn't seek out the murder of Israeli civilians. And many of the Israeli civilians who died, as you pointed out, died because they were caught up in a crossfire between Hamas fighters and Israeli fighters. And also not just Hamas fighters, but many of these non-Hamas militants who went in there got trapped in Israel. They were taking hostages. They got trapped in the various kibbutzes and military encampments. They didn't have the discipline to withdraw back into Gaza. So they were trapped with hostages, and the Israeli force came in and killed them. And when you look at the dead fighters, they said, these are Hamas. They weren't Hamas. They were other militants, people from different factions, or just civilians who took up a gun. But that's, I think, was the mistake of Hamas. This was a very well-planned, well-executed military operation. They should have foreseen that there would have been a surge of hate-filled emotion coming out of Gaza to take advantage of the holes that appeared in the fence. And they should have done something to stop that.
So, from your point of view, what Hamas did from a military point of view is good. They did a good job, excellent job. But they made a mistake of not controlling the extra mobs, whatever you want to call them, the people who just came after that. So,
yeah, because if you're a military commander is responsible for everything that happens in their area of operations, everything that happens. When you take control of an area, when you initiate an operation, you are in charge, and you have to take responsibility. Just like if I were a Marine who took over a neighborhood, I am responsible not only for defeating the enemy forces arrayed before me, but securing the welfare of the civilians that are in that neighborhood. I must ensure that I have a methodology to prevent looting, to prevent robbery, rape, murder. I'm responsible. And if I don't do that, then it's my fault. So 100%. Hamas has to own this.
Okay, so
go ahead. It's a minor debating point. The point is, generally speaking, what Hamas did on October 7th is one of the greatest military operations in modern history.
So let's say that in an alternative universe, Hamas actually took control over the people who came with them, the mobs. Do you and we didn't see the number of civilians got killed in Israel, or all that too much propaganda material inducing propaganda. Do you think Israel would have reacted the same way they have reacted now?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter.
Because they were humiliated.
Yes,
They
you
were
got to humiliate.
humiliated.
Exactly, exactly.
And I also believe that, and again, Hamas can speak for itself. This is my assessment. I believe Hamas always intended for Israel to react the way it did. This is part of the trap. Hamas cannot win politically unless they get the world to change their opinion about Israel. The world will not change their opinion about Israel unless Israel slaughters the Palestinian people. Israel, since 2006, has articulated a policy, the Dahiwa principle, named after the suburb of West Beirut, that they flattened in 2006 as a way of collective punishment for the successful resistance of Hezbollah. Israel has said that it is our policy to hold the civilian populations accountable for the actions of those organizations who are opposing us. So against Hezbollah, they flattened Beirut, they flattened a variety of towns. They collectively punished the civilian population. In 2008, they turned the Dahiwa principle against Gaza for the first time, and they've used it against Gaza 2008, 2010, 2014, 2018, 2020, 2021. They've bombed the civilian population. It's what Israel does. And so Hamas, I believe, lured Israel into a trap by humiliating their military, by inflicting this tremendous defeat. It's an absolute humiliation against Israel. They knew that Israel would respond by bombing the civilian population. Now, some people will say that's cold-hearted on the part of Hamas. You know, Charles de Gaulle in 1944 was approached by the military command, Dwight Eisenhower and others, and said, we're going to liberate France. We're going to launch an attack on Normandy. But to do this, we are going to have to bomb areas where there are French civilians. We will be killing a lot of French civilians. And Charles de Gaulle said, how many? They said tens of thousands. He said, they must die in the interest of liberty.
For the big cause.
60,000 French civilians were killed during the Normandy campaign. 60,000, because that is the price that has to be paid for liberation.
For the Palestinian
Hamas
state.
understands that there must be a price paid by the Palestinian people if Gaza is to be liberated from Israeli oppression. And so the Palestinian people are the true heroes of this conflict.
Of course.
Because they are standing, they are suffering, but they are not yielding. They are not surrendering. They are there, and their continued presence is frustrating for Israel. Israel wants to evict them all from Gaza, wants to kick them out, but they won't be kicked out.
Yeah.
It's tragic. It's horrible, but I think it's one of these horrible necessities of life that if there is going to be a free Palestine, an independent Palestine, it can only be built on the blood of the martyrs who are being sacrificed in that cause.
So do you think Egypt's position and Jordan's position to refuse the displacement of Palestinians through the whole thing was, in a way, they did the right thing to do? That was the right thing to do, just to allow for a Palestinian state in the future? Because if that was the plan of Israel, to push them all out, and they said no, we're not gonna allow that, so maybe it works for the bigger plan.
I'm not going to give Egypt and Jordan the benefit of the doubt, because neither Egypt nor Jordan have ever expressed sympathy for a Palestinian state. They've cooperated with Israel for the continued punishment of the Palestinians. The credit goes to Hamas, who knows the Egyptians and knows the Jordanians better than most. They knew just like they knew how Israel would respond. They could anticipate what Egypt and Jordan would do, and they would use that to their advantage. They knew that Egypt would not open up the gates and allow millions of Gazans to displace there. They knew that Jordan would not allow the Palestinians from Gaza to come to Jordan. This isn't because Egypt and Jordan are sympathetic to the Hamas cause, the exact opposite. Egypt and Jordan are opposed to Hamas. But Hamas, their leadership has been very politically astute, and they knew how Egypt and Jordan would respond. They've used the behavior of Egypt and Jordan against Egypt and Jordan on the benefit of Hamas, just like they used how they knew Israel would overreact to their benefit. So look, Hamas is winning this thing politically. There's been a sea change in global opinion, and it's all because of what Hamas has done.
So it was a master plan after all. Like it seems so till now.
The proof is in the pudding. You never want to count your chickens before they hatch. You
Yeah,
don't want to spike the football until you get in the end zone.
exactly.
So it's too early for Hamas to do a victory dance. But what I would say is that when you look at what the plan appears to be, and remember, Hamas's objectives are very limited. The creation of a Palestinian state. They're not talking about the destruction of Israel. The creation of a Palestinian state, the freedom of 5,000 plus Palestinians held prisoner by Israel, and the restoration of Muslim control over Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is what Hamas is looking to do, to accomplish. These are very achievable objectives. And I believe Hamas is going to achieve all three of them by the time this campaign is done. So it is a genius campaign. They haven't tried to, it's like a space program early on where you say, our very first space launch, we're going to the moon. No, you're not.
I see
The
what
very
you're
first
saying. Yeah,
space
yeah.
launch is you're going to go up and come down.
Exactly. One step at
Hamas
a
is very
time.
realistic.
Yes, one step
They're
at a
very
time.
realistic of what they can achieve here. And because they've been realistic about that, they're going to achieve it. And look what they've done. Look what they've done. They have told Hezbollah and Iran, don't intervene.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because you see, a larger conflict is not good for Hamas. A larger conflict means that Hamas becomes a minor player in a regional war. And Hamas's goals and objectives are no longer number one priority of the world. It becomes, how do we stop a war with Iran? How do we stop a war with Hezbollah? Those become the priorities. And Hamas doesn't want that to happen. So they have prepared for this long conflict. And they have told Hezbollah and they have told Iran, we don't need you to intervene. Now, what Hezbollah has done, because this is, whether Hamas wants it or not, understand that by creating this geopolitical disruption with Israel, you create problems throughout the Middle East. This is resonating everywhere, in Lebanon, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Jordan, everywhere. Hezbollah has to take into account that they are a resistance organization that has talked openly about supporting Hamas. So Hezbollah needs to manage escalation. There is a desire on many who want Hezbollah to intervene, who believe now is the time for Hezbollah to intervene. Hezbollah can't intervene because it destroys what Hamas is trying to accomplish. But Hezbollah cannot be silent. And so you see this escalation management taking place as both Hezbollah and Israel trade military attacks, but it's designed to relieve the pressure on both Israel and Hezbollah. It's not designed to explode. The same thing with Iran. Iran is managing the pressure relief in Iraq and in Syria with the Shia militias attacking American bases. But neither the United States nor Iran want this to explode into a major war. So it's escalation management, trying to hold back the pressure while everybody focuses on solving the problem that Hamas has created with regard to Palestine.
So when you talk about balancing the attacks on all these players, that means the status quo is what all of them want, and I'm talking about the players like Israel, Iran, Iran's militias, Hezbollah. Why do you want to keep it like that? Why do you enjoy doing this little skirmish everywhere and every now and then? Like, what's the goal after all of that? If the goal is not to destroy the enemy.
Well, again, Hamas's goal is not to destroy the enemy.
That's Hamas. But how about the other ones, like Iran and Iran's militias?
Iran's goal was not to destroy Israel. Iran and Hezbollah were taken by surprise here. They weren't coordinated. Hassan Nasrallah has said that. We weren't told what was happening. We were taken by surprise. It wasn't until October 9th that we could begin to respond to what was happening. But he also said that we talked to Hamas and they said, we have this under control. We have a plan. We have this under control. But there's emotions. Anytime Palestinians and Israelis are engaged in a conflict, especially one where you have overwhelming casualties on the part of the Palestinians, there will be a tremendous amount of outrage amongst the Arab population or amongst the Muslim population. Outrage, and this outrage has to be controlled. You can't make it go away because it exists. So it has to be controlled. And that's what's happening with the attacks on the American bases in Syria and in Iraq. It's being managed. They attack them. We don't overreact. You notice we respond with our own attacks. Then they attack, we respond. The idea is to slow it down, not to allow it to blow up, because if we attack overwhelmingly, we could end up in a war with Iran. Iran doesn't want a war with the United States. Iran doesn't want a war with Israel. Iran, if everybody recalls, is looking forward to a future of economic prosperity. Iran just made good with Saudi Arabia through a Chinese brokered rapprochement. Iran is looking for a diplomatic solution, not a military solution. Iran is working for a ceasefire in Yemen. Iran is trying to stabilize the situation in Lebanon and in Syria. So Iran's not looking for a fight with Israel. This took them by surprise. So Iran's focus, remember, they joined BRICS. That's not a military alliance. That's an economic alliance.
Right.
They're members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That's an economic organization. Iran's future is to break free of the chains of sanctions that have been imposed on Iran, to liberate their economy and allow the Iranian people to prosper. Any government that doesn't look out for the prosperity of their people is a bad government. The Iranian government is not a bad government, and they're not going to sacrifice the prosperity of the Iranian people for a Hamas provocation that Hamas didn't even talk to them about. The same thing with Hassan Nasrallah. Hezbollah is a political party, not just a movement of resistance. It is a political party that is committed to the betterment of Lebanon, the entirety of Lebanon. Why would Hassan Nasrallah throw that all away, all the work that Hezbollah has done in the course of the past decades to legitimize themselves as a political party in the eyes of the Lebanese people, to be seen as a party that is beneficial to all Lebanese? Why would he throw that away by attacking Israel blindly and opening Lebanon up to be destroyed the same way Gaza is being destroyed? That is not good leadership. That is bad leadership. Hassan Nasrallah has never been accused of being a bad leader. He is a good leader. So Hassan Nasrallah, together with Ibrahim Raisi in Iran, are working on escalation management, how to control all of this
Chaos.
proclivity for violence, how to keep it under control so that Hamas can win their victory. If any of these things blow up, I can guarantee you that if Hezbollah comes across the border and invades Israel and there's a major war there, we will not be talking about Gaza anymore. We will not be talking about a Palestinian state. We will be talking about a larger conflict that gets into the existential survival of Israel. And that's a completely different debate. One of the reasons why Hamas can prevail on the global community right now is that they're talking about the creation of a Palestinian state. The world supports this. But the moment this becomes about the destruction of Israel, the world will not support this. So it's imperative to stay focused on the mission.
I like that. So that's why, because Nasrallah's last speech, a lot of people thought it was a little moderate and almost selfish, especially in the Middle Eastern community. You called it a genius speech that's gonna go down in history as a genius speech.
Genius speech.
So, from your point of view, is it genius just because it's focused on the main goal of Hamas, which is the Palestinian state, or is it genius because it's gonna allow Nasrallah to live longer, to remain Hezbollah to stay for longer?
I think Hezbollah has shown and has earned its spurs, so to speak, as a resistance movement. And if anybody thinks that Hezbollah exists for selfish reasons like that, then they don't understand Hezbollah. Hezbollah is a resistance organization. Its fighters are extraordinarily well disciplined, and they've shown a willingness to sacrifice themselves in support of a cause worthy of that sacrifice. Okay, Hassan Nasrallah did not say that defending Hamas is not worthy of Hezbollah sacrifice. In fact, he has said that if Hamas is threatened with destruction, then Hezbollah will intervene. There will be a larger war. But he is not a man who is going to allow emotion to interfere with good policy. Hamas has defined a conflict. Hamas defined it, not Hezbollah. Hamas is the one who has determined what they want to achieve and how they're going to achieve it. And Hamas has said, we don't need you to intervene. Who is Hezbollah then to say, we don't care what you want, Hamas, we're going to intervene? Who is Hezbollah to say that? You can't be more Palestinian than the Palestinians.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay? And the same thing with Iran. Who is Iran to tell the Palestinian people, look, you are on the cusp of finally getting a Palestinian state, but because we are insulted by what Israel is doing, we will undo all of that to create a larger war where there will never be a Palestinian state. No. Hassan Nasrallah is a genius because he has taken an extremely complicated situation where the average human who is filled with outrage, if you remember, the fists are clenched.
Yeah.
I forget.
You can tell.
Fists are clenched, tears down the face.
Yeah.
About the deaths that are happening. This was Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, the most rational actor, fists are clenched, tears because of the death of the Palestinian children. Who wouldn't want to intervene? But you have to be responsible. You have to pull back from the emotions and look at the reality of what you want to be the outcome to be. The best outcome for the Middle East is not the destruction of Israel, but the destruction of political Zionism.
Exactly.
The best outcome is not, the promotion of a Palestinian state that replaces Israel as the occupier, as the hated. If it's Muslims oppressing Jews, that is bad. That is as bad as Jews oppressing Muslims. The best outcome is where Muslims and Jews can live together in peace in the Holy Land, whether it's a two-state solution or a single-state solution. That's not up for me to say. That's up for negotiators. But also one where Hassan Nasrallah and Hezbollah can continue to be good members of the Lebanese community, political community, looking out for the welfare of Lebanon, not turning their back on. How selfish is it for Hassan Nasrallah to say, I choose to attack Israel, knowing that the Lebanese people will pay the price? That's very selfish. Instead, he's saying, I am a Lebanese politician. I am somebody who cares about Lebanon. Hamas is a political party, not just a resistance movement. How selfish is it of Ibrahim Raisi to tell the Iranian people, after they have suffered for decades under economic sanctions, at the moment of their economic liberation, at the moment that he's ready to fulfill the promise he's made for many, many years, that the Iranian government has made to the people, that we are going to rise on our feet and we will restore ourselves economically, that sanctions did not defeat us. How selfish would it be to throw it all away because he wants to feel good about sending missiles against Israel? That's bad leadership. Hassan Nasrallah, Ibrahim Raisi, I think, have emerged as very good leaders. And the fact that the people who criticize them are those articulating for violence should tell you everything. Right. If Islam is indeed a religion of peace, and I believe it is. Look, war is war. War is a human condition. Humans are fallible. Humans make the mistakes. Religion can be abused by humans, misused for any number of causes. I condemn Al-Qaeda for perverting the cause of Islam in support of what they've done. If you want to live in peace, you have to have the maturity to live in peace, meaning you avoid the temptations of war where at all possible. Right now, there is a horrible war being waged between Israel and Hamas. That war must play itself out. But there's no reason, there's no need to bring war upon war upon war.
Well, like you said before,